Hey guys, welcome back. Metatrend's Mark here.
And I'm co-author Cole.
All right, if you hang on to the end of this video, you'll know how to actually avoid the debt trap for college education expenses.
So we're going to talk about the 3 myths of college today. We're going to talk about the BS behind you're going to make $1 million more if you go to graduate school, and it's not based on fact.
Right. All right, so we're also going to be talking about how colleges aren't necessarily as benevolent as they pretend to be, being with their nonprofit status. Also, why are people so interested in the designer names or so of the colleges? So, and how you can avoid that trap. So let's just talk about the myth of the $1 million. All right, so actually we just did some research on the difference between Northeastern and Binghamton.
Yeah.
Right, so those are two on your wish list. We're just picking on Northeastern because it just happened to be on Cole's wish list.
Yeah.
And I wanted to walk through and do an economic cost-benefit analysis of the two, and the numbers are quite staggering. So if we look at Binghamton, what was the overall all-in cost, including inflation too?
Including inflation, it's $120,200 something around.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so, and what was the all-in cost for Northeastern?
Northeastern was 200. Yeah,
No, it's $307,661. So you look at the differences between those two things. Now, one could argue, well, Northeastern's trying to portray itself as an elite college, and maybe they are. Situation though is it worth $200,000 more to go to Northeastern?
The problem is a number like that is hard to calculate. Something like to be worth $300,000 over Binghamton, which is $200,000 less, is something that, like, people say it's networking or the prestige of the university. It's you can't determine that factually.
I would agree with you there. Also, too, it's like nagging to me, and this is actually something that's quite passionate for me, because I'm going to have 4 sons go through the college education experience in short order. You're about to. Max is already in it. Noah's going to be soon, and then Owen does. So it's like when I graduated college, I went to junior college or community college for 2 years that I paid for myself. And believe it or not, I walked to it. I know that sounds like I walked uphill both ways in the snow. The situation was, it was the truth. I actually foregoed buying a car to use it for tuition costs, and I think it was like $600 a semester back then. I can't recall the exact cost, but I did a quick estimate on it. My all-in cost of going 2 years to Queensborough Community College and then doing 3 years at New Paltz was all in around $17,000. Of which I paid for about 15 of it myself, doing summer jobs, working in construction, and Granddad paid for about 2 of it. Now the situation though is when I graduated, my first job after graduation, I was making $17,000 a year, 17. So that would mean if we were going to utilize that as some type of measurement or comparison, if you're going to Northeastern, you got to graduate making $307,000 your first year out of graduation. Is that going to happen?
Probably not.
I wouldn't even say that you'd be likely to do that even from the $120,000 Binghamton.
Yeah.
So what we're really arguing here is, what is the extra $180,000? Well, let's just round it off. Let's just say it was $200,000. We did a quick future value of money analysis of the $200,000. So if you invested, let's say you went to Binghamton and your parents could actually afford the other $200,000, and you set that money aside in an account, in a savings account, or rather a brokerage account, and you earned just 7.2% rate of return each year. I use that because it's called the rule of 72. If you're earning 7.2%, your money will double once every 10 years. So if we estimate what would that value of those dollars be when you actually retired, it turns out to be worth $3.2 million. So now we go back to that argument about that you could earn $1 million more if you go to university. Well, I just talked to you about how you could earn $3.2 million more by not overpaying for it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. You save so much money based on.
But there's another aspect to how that fallacy of the $1 million more. What you want to do is you want to look at Marty Nemco's videos too. He's a PhD out of Berkeley, who skewers the university system quite eloquently. But one of the things he brought up was how in the past, retroactively, if you analyze it, it could be worth $1 million more. Because back when my parents were going to college degrees were actually very rare. Even if we looked at the baby boom generation, like my brothers and sisters, I'm actually an early generation Xer, but even if we look at the baby boom generation, only 37% even attended college, let alone graduated. So if you graduated in that world with a college degree, you were rare.
Yes.
So now you compare it to sit back and say, okay, well, 70% of people attend college now. Only 45% or so actually graduate, and not in the 4-year time period. Usually it's 5 or 6 years. The situation, though, is now are you rare? And going back to the earlier formulas you've seen in our other videos, rarity plus usefulness equals value. Mm-hmm. Well, it's really not that rare.
Yeah, so not anymore.
So now you're sitting back saying you're going to pay $307,000 to go to Northeastern. And frankly, we're only picking on Northeastern because it was one of Cole's choices. They're not even the most expensive college in the country. So the whole myth about the $1 million more doesn't really work these years. It's also disproportionate because some of the people that actually attended college become billionaires. And so whenever they talk about averages, the billionaires skew the averages. What you really want to look at is the mean, which is significantly lower than $1 million more. Yeah. So then think about what about the opportunity cost of what if you went into business right away as opposed to attending college, or took the money from the parents that they said that could afford to send you to college and then bought you a franchise or trained you to be an entrepreneur, funded your startup or something along those lines. You get what I mean?
Yeah, that could realistically be a much better choice to make than going to college.
Yeah, because like how many college classes did I take that were completely useless? In fact, my entire finance degree you could replace with one function on a scientific calculator. And literally the last class I took, the last test, I walked out threw my scientific calculator against the wall and jumped up and down on it. So it was borderline useless. I think what it did, though, is it made me look like to prospective employers that I was willing to do the diligent process to actually earn the degree. So it was like a key to a door, but I can't argue that it was particularly useful once I got in the door.
Yeah. A degree is more useful than the knowledge that you learn in college, I feel.
Yeah, and I think eventually when employers start to see the holes in the whole degree thing, especially when you can take every single one of MIT's courses online now for free, well, maybe that kid's so clever to not have to pay the extra $250,000 to go get that degree. Maybe they don't need the degree.
Yeah.
So when that worm turns, boy, I think the university is really subject to severe disruption. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was the first myth. What's the second myth?
Colleges aren't the beneficent nonprofits that they claim to be.
You might want to say that word again.
Beneficent. Beneficent.
Okay, so maybe you'll learn how to pronounce that in college when you go. But the situation is I don't think that they're the benevolent not-for-profit that they once were pretended to be. Mm-hmm. I would even argue that if politicians were really looking out for us, that they'd actually revoke the tax-free status of most of these not-for-profit institutions because they're run like for-profit big business. And the real deal is that the mind does not fully develop until the mid-20s. For girls, it's around 22, and for boys, it's 26 years old. So we're not really fully adults until those ages. Those are the ages beyond college. So you get an 18-year-old like yourself making a significant economic decision. Now, again, if it's your parents' money and they don't care, knock yourself out, do whatever you got to do. What I'm worried about is the people that don't qualify for that. The ones who would be hopelessly mired in debt for a crappy little undergraduate degree that is nowhere near worth. I mean, when Uncle Jack went to York College for 5 years, what was his cost?
$500, I think.
$500 total for his entire college degree. Now, he's 14 years older than me, so obviously those days are long gone. But even when I went, it was only $17,000. When his daughter graduated at Northeastern, it was over $200,000 in cost.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that the value of it has actually grown by that. In fact, you really can't tell me why it's actually the price is actually inflated at all. So, and we're fighting, frankly, deflation in every other category in economics except for healthcare, and frankly, they can't justify it either. So what we're looking at here is why has the cost increased when the actual, or let's say, why has the price increased in the last 20 years at such a high inflation rate when the actual cost to educate the child has actually gone down.
Well, it comes back to the designer name. We live in a society where name brands and anything like that is very important to people, and people see it as one of the most important things about college. So you're really paying for more the name than the education.
And some of them, I think I agree with you there. I think some of them actually, when you look at it and say, okay, if you saw that name on a resume, you'd be like, wow, that's a really impressive resume. So if you're going to take, like, let's say Fairfield University or even Northeastern and compare that to Harvard, are they comparing?
Not really.
I mean, so you take the Harvard over the Northeastern or Harvard over Fairfield?
Yeah.
So, and the reason why I'm picking on Fairfield is at the time of the recording of this video, I believe they are the most expensive college in the country, and which I don't know how that is. So, but the real deal, the part that I think is unconscionable, is how there are less professors relative to the pool of academics compared to 20 years ago. They're not giving full tenure to professors anymore. There's more and more adjunct professors, which are like part-time college professors. So that means the actual cost to actually educate the child has actually decreased in the last 20 years, while the price of the college is actually inflated by 500-fold in the last 20 years. And the federal government is actually incentivizing them to do this. Now, this gets a little bit complicated, but when you increase the access to loans and decrease the cost of those loans, you get what I would call interest rate-based inflation, kind of like the housing bubble, with the Clintons actually lowering the barrier of entry into owning a home. Didn't necessarily make the home more affordable. It actually made the homes that existed more valuable. So the value actually shot up. So when we look at college that way, I think the federal government is guilty of this too, and yet I hear no politicians talking about this. So what I would argue is, to your point about the cachet of designer names, is, are you going into debt so that the college you're going to can claim they're an elite college? So who's really benefiting from this? That to me is unconscionable.
It's the colleges, yeah.
Yeah, so now we go back to, so the first myth we debunked was making $1 million more, not really so anymore. You might actually be better off not going to college, taking the money you would have spent on it and buying a business or a franchise or something. That we've actually covered in other videos. The other thing is, they're not benevolent not-for-profits. What they're doing really borders on criminal. And frankly, what I would argue is the government needs to regulate these things better. We'll cover that in another video. This is actually a 3-part video thing. This one is for you, the potential college student. The other ones are going to be for the parents. And then lastly, what do politicians should be doing about this? So the last thing is the designer name. I mean, you can probably tell looking at me, I don't really care about designer names. I don't know, do you?
Not really.
So the situation is, that stuff seems like eyewash to me. So how can you actually avoid this whole trap? Well, it's rare when the cheapest alternative actually turns out to be the best one. So you want to cover that, or should I?
Well, it's the best way to go is probably community college for 2 years, save a ton of money.
About approximately 30 grand over away state colleges.
And deal with professors that are trained in educating students rather than researching in their fields or progressing their fields in some way or another. Or
some esoteric way, too.
Yeah. And after those 2 years, go to state school, which is incredibly so much cheaper than private schools.
Let me cover one thing here, because this is kind of cool. On Long Island, Suffolk Community College actually has an arrangement with Stony Brook, as far as I can tell, that if you go to Stony Brook and say, hey, I'm going to go to you as my final destination, but I want to go to Suffolk first, earn some credits, know what I want to be, Suffolk and Stony Brook have an arrangement where Stony Brook will accept all the credits as is, and accept you into the actual courses, provided you do better than, I think, a 3.0, which would be the equivalent of about a B. So the situation is, if you can arrange those two things, you'll save 30 grand in overall costs, which could actually end up paying for a graduate degree.
Yeah.
So if you add it all up, the situation is, how do you avoid it? Look at the community college system. In fact, I saw an economic report. I can't remember which medium it was in, but it talked about the CUNY colleges in the city of New York from an economic ROI, return on investment, have the highest return on investment of any university system in the world.
Wow.
Because you're just paying tuition. They're community colleges for the most part. I'm talking about like Baruch would be an example of that. Mm-hmm. So all you're doing is paying tuition, which is really nominal. And under Cuomo's new thing, if you make less than a certain amount of dollars, it's actually for free. So when you graduate, you're graduating and going into a workforce that's making significantly more money with that. So compared to everything else. So the situation is, what is it again? It's community college first 2 years. The money,
State.
Then state college. Don't worry about the cachet of these elite universities. My belief is complete BS. Yeah. The one thing that they argue, the one thing is the network.
Yeah, networking, and that's just difficult to prove. You can't determine the income after college based on networking.
Yeah, I think it's also when you affect the entirety of the whole, you can't actually glean from that analysis what's the causality of it. So it's and I think what they do is they invest way too much attention on it, over-promising, and what I'm afraid of is under-delivering. Because frankly, right now, credit card debt, for the first time ever in U.S. history, is actually now second to tuition debt. That's something that's morally reprehensible, and frankly, any smart politician would do something about that. That could be a national campaign, get national notoriety about it. So what's the message again? Community college, best bang for your buck, save some money, and then after you go to undergraduate, which is the four-year universities, you might even be able now to afford a graduate degree, which actually would make you rare. Mm-hmm. And rarity plus usefulness equals value. So thanks for watching. One thing is, keep in mind, we are the authors of Meta Trends in the Next Economy. Everything you need in a one-flight read.